on Impact Catalyst is the CEO of Tampa Bay Watch, Dwayne Virgint. Welcome, sir.
Thanks, Joe. Great to be on the show.
So a lot of exciting things happening at Tampa Bay Watch. Most people know you started out up in Tierra Verde. Is that correct?
I actually started down in St. Pete. I opened the Discovery Center a couple of years ago, and have moved into the CEO role and headquartered out of Tierra Verde, but I'm all over Pinellas County.
That's great. And now the sort of crown jewel located on the pier in the Discovery Center.
Yeah, we're pretty excited. It's coming up on 2-year anniversary for the Discovery Center. It's been an interesting 2 years for all of us, but we're excited to actually have a normal spring break and a regular season down there. So it's nice to see people out and about and not having to wear a mask.
Yeah. So let's talk about what a regular season looks like. What's on the docket for the coming months?
So overall, we've got a new exhibit opening down at the Discovery Center. We have a frog exhibit that'll open later on, probably May or June of this year, and it'll feature both native species and invasive species. We do a lot with invasive species down there. It helps, fond of saying that everybody loves Florida, and that includes all kinds of plants and animals that aren't native here. And the problem is when some of these animals come in, they really take a liking to the native species and start to decimate the populations by overeating them. So we'll cover some of that. And we also have a pretty spectacular Earth Day lined up this year. It's a biggie for us organizationally. So we're going to start out during the day with an installation project at Lassing Park, and I'll talk a little more about the living shorelines and some of the work we're doing there in a moment. But I think we're going to have a couple of hundred volunteers out there for this one, which would be great. And then we've got some educational programs going on at the Discovery Center during the day. And then our first annual Earth Night, which is actually a fundraiser for us down there. And Randy Wayne White, who's actually in town for a book signing today, has got a new release out, is going to come up and host the evening for us. So that's going to be pretty terrific. So a lot of great things going on at the DC over the next few months.
Yeah, and very important work. Let's dig into a couple of those. The invasive species. Can you give us some examples of some of the most impactful species that we're working on dealing with right now?
Yeah, we talk a lot about lionfish. We actually sponsored, FWC does a huge program with them. We help sponsor their fishing tournament upstate every year, up in Destin. And the reason it's so important is basically they're non-native species. And you say, well, they're pretty to look at, but they are gobbling up all of these other species that are there. We do a regular program out at the Discovery Center that is called Lionfish for Lunch. It's a dissection program. And it's amazing what happens when we go through that process, but the highlight is when we open up the stomach. That sounds gross, but what's fascinating is what comes out of the stomach of a lionfish. And we had one program last year where there were 35 small fish that come out of that lionfish stomach, out of a 12-inch lionfish. So when you think about it, if it's eating 36 smaller species, how many of those animals are not going to grow to full size? And that's really decimating some of the fish population. So that's one of the ones we have to be really careful of.
And as far as mitigating that, how effective are the solutions that are on the table right now? Obviously, I love watching videos of people, going down and sort of manually collecting them, but you feel like that's, they're at all different depths and things like that, not being touched, not available to humans for the most part. So, can you make a dent in the problem?
Well, I think, the way we're approaching it right now, I want to say collectively, is because they are so diverse. They have spread from as far up as Nova Scotia, is what I've been told. And of course, all the way across in the Gulf, on the other side of Texas. So part of the problem is trying to get that under control, and it's very difficult. I think we're putting a dent in it, but I think the big thing is until we know how to control them and defeat them, we don't let them win. We try and manage the numbers until some kind of natural predator evolves to be able to manage the species correctly.
And Earth Day, so it's a big day for you and for the organization. What are some of the specific things we can look forward to celebrating?
So one of the biggies for us is the Lassing Park project that launched for us I believe in December is when it was December when we launched that. And that was a couple of years in the making through permitting and process. But Lansing Park has experienced some huge erosion in St. Pete. And so the first step of that was moving towards creating a living shoreline. And what that is a combination of steps that help to both protect the shoreline and create habitat for species. And so we start with oyster reef balls, which we build with community volunteers, and they are these concrete domes that actually have holes in them and allow species to start to move into those to habitate. So kind of acts as a nursery for some of the smaller animals. It also ends up being someplace for oysters to propagate. And it'll be loaded with oysters. And the significance of oysters are that they are a natural organic species that are found in the bay. And one oyster can filter up to 50 gallons of seawater per day. And so all we do is create the environment for them, and the spores are in the water, they naturally fix and start to grow out on that. So that was the first stage that we did back in December. Now the next phase will be installing oyster shell reef to help protect more of the shoreline that's there. That also helps with the seagrass. And when you're completed with all this, with a living shoreline, we actually go back and install marsh grass, and all that starts to fill in. And basically, we're reclaiming areas that were lost to erosion. We're creating environments that are helpful for the species that are out there and protecting the shoreline. And these living shorelines anchor in so strongly, they're actually better than seawalls when we experience hurricanes or storm surge.
That's great. And the projects you're talking about are big and noteworthy, and they are a few of many needs that are out there in the environment. So when you lead Tampa Bay Watch, what's sort of your strategy, for leveraging your specific strengths as an organization, not doing things that are already being done? How do you pick your projects? And then once you pick them, how do you tend to interact with the solutions?
Well, that's a very good question, and I can tell you, I think a key part of that is evolution, right? We started out doing different projects over time. And since we're a science-based organization, as we learn more, we tend to migrate to things that actually are better solutions over time. So where we first started out building the oyster shell bars, what we found was that they were getting walloped when we had major storm surge that was coming in. So we went back and discovered oyster reef balls to go in front of them, which are concrete, which actually protect those. So they are able to accept, basically break up more of the wave energy that's coming through. So from an organizational perspective, that's part of how we've grown into going from one step and finding a better solution along the way. I think the bottom line for us organizationally, which is what I'm committed to and what our staff are, is really impactful change. Yeah, it really is the impact. And ideally, when I take a look at that, I take a look at generational impact. We want to do things that are going to make life better for people today. We want to ensure that the environment is here in good shape for the future, but really for, our children's children and grandchildren. What are we doing to plan today that's going to impact future generations? And that's the most important work that we could possibly do.
And so when we dig into the dome example, you're identifying, it's all Tampa Bay Watch staff that's actually identifying, the places to put the domes, acquiring the domes, paying for them, getting the place, actually bringing them out. It's almost like a mini construction project to take those out and drop them in the right spot. And then of course there's the maintenance element, and then you have to measure your success. And so all of that is done within the sort of confines of the organization, or are there partners involved? How does that all play out?
It's a combination, and I need to emphasize that we are a community-driven and volunteer-driven organization. We've got a small staff, so when we look at things like the oyster reef balls, those are built over a series of time. We have volunteers out here a couple of days a week. We call them super volunteers. They're out here pouring concrete molds. They're out here in the summer. They're out here, when it's raining, is minimal rain, but they're out there, when it's unpleasant to be able to get this lined up and do the installation, and they just love love doing it, as do our staff. So that's a big component of how we get things done. From the informational side, we do have great partners that are out there. We are blessed to work with the Tampa Bay Estuary Program as an example. Ed Sherwood and Maya Burke are incredible people. And so they are ones that look at the science. We're able to collect some data for them. They're able to share a lot of data with us. And we're really networked with a lot of other like organizations around the country and around the East Coast specifically. We're able to share these resources. So we're finding better and better practices to build upon and do a more efficient job with the work that we're out there doing.
That's great. And if one aspires to become a super volunteer, what sort of things or what sort of people are you looking for? What sort of roles? What sort of talents?
Really, it comes down to the commitment. We do a lot with, we have corporate groups that come out to do day volunteering with us. We have our super volunteers that are out here that are a combination of retirees and young people that come out when they can to volunteer on these projects. We have scout groups that come in and student groups, student organizations that come out. So basically, they go to the website and check in. We look for people that have a level of commitment. It is physical activity, but what's important is there's always something for somebody to do. So they don't have to be Superman or Superwoman to be able to, or Super Day to be able to carry an oyster reef ball. There's other things that they can do during the day to participate in the program that are all impactful and make a big difference.
That's great. Well, let's finish up with just any things that people that are watching this obviously interested in protecting our waters. The average person in everyday life, what are a couple things they can do to contribute?
Well, thanks. That's a good point. One of the big things that we talk about is microplastics. It gets overlooked very often, and it's a hard issue to fathom. The problem we run into is that plastics don't go away; they just break down into smaller and smaller quantities. So there was a study that was done last year. The most recent study I read was done in Australia, where they've identified that we are now, between the air we breathe, the food we eat, and the water that we drink, we're ingesting a credit card-sized piece of plastic on our bodies once a week.
Wow. And
that's pretty scary when you think about what goes into plastic, right? It's a petroleum-based product. We know that's not good for us. So things like we practice, the R's, basically recycling, reuse wherever you can, reduce use of plastics. The 3 R's are critical. So taking a look at those are very beneficial things you can do every day, knowing that what we put into the ground is going to come back to us in one way or form or another. And so making better decisions, making aware decisions, and if we all do that, it's going to make a larger impact.
Great. And so just to be precise about microplastics, to your point, all plastics ultimately become microplastics. So they're not a separate category of plastics. They're sort of an end destination for all plastic as they break down.
Primarily, when we take a look at one of the recycling plants that are in town here, they have size restrictions. What they can't recycle, they end up burning. And so it's turned into energy, and they found a decent, way to be able to deal with some of the plastic that way. I don't like the idea of the burning, but there's a way that they chemically control it safely for us. But outside of that, whatever gets left out there, you're right, it just keeps breaking down into something so microscopic that it's in our body. They're finding it in fish now. It used to be they'd find a piece of plastic in salmon. Now they're finding it embedded in the flesh at a microscopic level. And so we're not going to get away from it. It's better. It's hard to do because change is hard for most everybody. But looking at it practically, it's better if we approach this and say, what can we do to work around, work through this so that we're in better shape today for ourselves and for the future generations. Nobody wants to be eating plastic. Nobody wants to be here for 100 years.
That's right. And even incremental reduction, 10, 20% multiplied by a few billion people, it does matter.
Yeah, it adds up.
Dwayne, Virgint, I really appreciate the time and all the work that you do with the organization. It's a fantastic organization. I've taken the kids and we've dissected fish and had a blast and learned a lot. And thank you.
My pleasure, Joe. Thanks so much. Thanks for what you do. And thanks for bringing the Catalyst to St. Pete.